Now let's talk about, because you seem very humble in this, but your part in creating what we now refer to as smooth jazz. Again, when we're talking about the Jeff Lorber sound, you said it was just kind of something that evolved. Do you look now at what we call smooth jazz and say to yourself, man, it would have been nice to have stations like this when I was playing music a few years ago when you were creating this sound? What do you think about that? And then again, the respect that you have for other musicians as well, who will often refer to you as a founding father or as a foundation of what we look at now as something called smooth jazz.
Well, first of all, the radio stations that we had back in the mid to late 70s, it was incredible because as far as FM was concerned, I mean, there was basically only two kinds of stations. There was top 40 stations, and then there were stations that at the time were called AOR, which means album-oriented rock, which means it didn't actually mean rock. It just mean they played albums. They didn't play the singles, they played albums, and basically these guys could play whatever they wanted. And back in those days, FM was just sort of at the beginning of its popularity, and the people that owned the stations, they didn't know that they had just invested like $5,000 or $10,000 or $15,000 into a radio station. They didn't know that like in about 5 years that was going to be worth $50 million to Clear Channel or like some big corporation.
That'd be us.
So, they would basically let these DJs play anything they wanted. And they would play, John Coltrane and Led Zeppelin and, Yes, and, you name it. It was just, they had total freedom to play anything they wanted to play. And so back in those days when I was visiting stations that would play my record, it was rock stations. And it was just a different era. It was before everything got differentiated into like R&B and rock and smooth jazz and all that kind of stuff. But when I look back at the beginning of smooth jazz, what I see is that the early jazz fusion movement, it was sort of very raw. There was a lot of guys that were doing real like avant-garde stuff or like jazz rock, like Tony Williams. He'd play these like real super high energy rock jams, and then somebody would play all this avant-garde crazy jazz blowing over it and stuff. And then everything sort of then there was like the second generation of like that kind of came out of that, which would be more like my band or the Pat Metheny band or Spyro Gyra. Those were early groups that kind of took all that idea about blending different influences, but kind of smoothed it out a little bit and had music that was more melodic and more. It was kind of instrumental pop music, but still very jazzy, and the average person could maybe get into it a little bit more. And so I see that as a big sort of change that kind of led the way eventually to what we now know as smooth jazz, I guess.
My guest again is Mr. Jeff Lorber. And there's so many things I want to talk about. I know you have a limited amount of time here, but I also want to, because what you've done was pioneering, in addition to just being great music to listen to. Your impact on hip-hop, which you may or may not have intended to happen, but for some people, one of the greatest hip-hop songs of all time. So for those of you out there who remember hearing Lil Kim's Crush on You, I'll let you tell the story that you shared about the first time that you heard Lil Kim's Crush on You on the radio.
Yeah, because...
by the way, the song was originally Rain Dance,
yeah,
right?
Exactly, right.
And it's by Jeff Lorber.
Well, what happened was, they had recorded that song, but nobody had told me anything about it. And so the first time I heard it, I was driving in my car in my neighborhood in Los Angeles, and I switched on the R&B station, and there's my song. And I was like flabbergasted and shocked. I just about got into a car accident because I was just so amazed. Because, first of all, I didn't expect to hear my song, and then I definitely didn't expect it to be Lil' Kim and Notorious Big. And also, they did a hell of a job. It's a really cool song. So, yeah, then I made some phone calls, and I found out that, everything was cool when they had cleared the sample and everything was all right. And, so nobody had told me about it. I got to hear it, like, coming straight out of my radio in my car. So it was it's a shocking way to find out about something. But it was great, in a way, because, I was glad to see a whole new generation of music fans get to hear this music that I had done, back in the early 80s.
Again, my guest Mr. Jeff Lorber. Thanks for taking the time to come.
My pleasure.
And share with us and give us, a bit of a history lesson, give us an opportunity to also find more background information on you. Truly one of the pioneers. And you seem to be just a great guy too, man.
Thank you.
Are you enjoying life? Is life fun?
I am. Yeah. It's I'm very lucky, because I'm doing something that I love to do, and making music, and I'm very grateful for that.
Well, all right, man. Much success to you. For me personally, it was the first time I'd seen you perform live. So get back up here to Seattle.
Okay, I'd love to.
Again, and then we'll have to do it again tonight. Again, he'll be at Jazz Alley, my guest again.